All right, everybody. This is Arata. I'm so happy to be here with Gabriel Kurman.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Is that the right way to pronounce your name?
Perfect.
We're going to be holding the microphone back and forth because the thing is that you might not see from this angle. Just 1 second, Gabriel. We are in beautiful, legendary Bitcoin Beach, El Zonte, Salvador. And it was a surprise because I just met Gabriel and then we were like, oh, let's do something improvised. I would love to hear more about your book, which you are a co-author, Bitcoin Circular Economies. And this totally unscripted, just a conversation between two friends who are passionate about Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
Gabriel, can you please tell a little bit about how did you arrive here? What has been? Don't be shy or don't be humble. Tell about the huge contribution you had to make it happen. Tell a little bit of the story so everybody can know more.
Yeah, so I don't think I've done a big contribution. I think in the case of the book, the heroes are those volunteers who make these circular economies. I'm an economist. I was born and raised in Argentina. So I suffered all the hyperinflation, capital controls, bank confiscations over my life and my family. I've seen the failure of the fiat system in firsthand. So I got involved with La BitConf, which is the longest running Bitcoin conference in Latin America, that tried to educate about Bitcoin as many people as we can, as early as possible. So you were actually the plebs, those just everyday people who benefit from Bitcoin and understand it as soon as possible. So we went to Brazil, we went to Chile, we did the conference, started in Buenos Aires, but then also we did it in Mexico. And in 2021, when Bukele announced the Bitcoin law, we decided to bring the conference to El Salvador. I also co-founded the project called La Bitcoineta, which is this Bitcoin minivan that is in the cover of the book. This is the second one. There are 6 around the world right now. The first one started in Argentina because we thought that having this major conference in capital cities once a year was great, but it was not enough. We wanted to make sure that Bitcoin was reaching every corner of Latin America and reaching people that maybe do not know about technology or not know about finance, that some of them thought that Bitcoin was not for them or that it was too complicated. So that's how La Bitcoineta project started, taking Bitcoin education to schools, parks, small towns, even talking to people in the street.
So you would drive around with the Bitcoineta, and there were like people working with Bitcoin. You would put them inside of the car and drive and make friends and connections. You would run a node inside of it.
Absolutely.
Like that, right?
So in the Argentine Bitcoineta has a Bitcoin node inside. It's like a little office. And it was actually run or driven by volunteers. So we would say, okay, we're going to Patagonia or we're going to Uruguay. Who wants to join? And just people from the community would decide, I can go with the Bitcoineta, I can drive it, I can give the talks. So it was actually supported by volunteers. There was some organization and some funding by La BitConf, by the conference, but then it was mainly possible due to the volunteers that participated. Right. And in 2021, we wanted to travel all the way from Argentina to El Salvador. But if you remember, it was in the middle of the lockdowns and the pandemic craze, so we got stopped. Then the volunteers, the drivers, the crew got stopped in Bolivia, and a week before the conference, we realized we were not going to make it. So we decided, like the same way that the honey badger doesn't care and can never be stopped, in the same way that Bitcoin cannot be stopped, we said we are going to reach El Salvador, no matter how.
Question. Okay, so every time I record this, it's lovely talking to you, meet you in person. That's already amazing. But I'm always thinking about people who are watching, like what's in there for them, like what can they learn, what can they absorb from this. So I'll try to ask a question. I don't know if anybody has asked you this before, but what was inside of your heart what motivated you? If you try to think back at the younger Gabriel back then, what were your motivations? What was painful to you that you would look around and say, enough is enough, I'm gonna leave these things behind, I have to burn some bridges, and this is what I'm gonna do because share with us, because it could also inspire people.
Absolutely. So I think as a child, as everyone else, I really wanted to make a contribution to the world. I wanted to change the world for the best. But then somehow through education, I realized that that was impossible, or I was convinced that that was impossible. So I decided to just try to make money. It was the only thing that I thought I could do to figure out what to do with it later. So I studied economics. I started working at the banking industry, the traditional private equity, and then when I discovered Bitcoin, I realized that wait a minute, there is a chance to change the world for the best. I understood, by learning Bitcoin, I understood all the failures and problems that the fiat system has, and how the people are being scammed and debased, how their economic energy is being absorbed and taken away from them through money printing and inflation without them realizing it. So I understood that by using Bitcoin and promoting Bitcoin and building a financial system on top of Bitcoin, we could make a big contribution to the world. And that just blew my mind. I understood that we could code a better world. And since then, I devoted my life to contributing to Bitcoin education. I'm also a co-founder of Roostalk, which is a Bitcoin sidechain that enables smart contracts to be programmed and secured by Bitcoin. So it's like Ethereum, but built on top of Bitcoin infrastructure, using Bitcoin as native currency. So I spent many years working on that with the rest of the team and the community. Now, this week, we reached an incredible milestone. So 80% of Bitcoin hashing power is secure in Rootstock at the same time. So it's by far the most secure smart contract platform in the planet, because we are just leveraging from Bitcoin security and infrastructure and giving back value to the Bitcoin infrastructure. But in 2021, when we came to El Salvador, I just met the Bitcoin Beach team and the Hope House team. I understood how they are using Bitcoin to help the locals, people who need Bitcoin and the most. So I just fell in love with them, with their teams, and devoted the rest of my time to help them on this journey.
Your answer made me even more curious. I have to confess, I did not have enough brains to look at Bitcoin and immediately understand what it was about. The first time I saw it, I thought, okay, people are talking about the price and it's going up in price. And I thought, well, this is kind of a bubble because it's the hype of the moment. Many people are greedy. So I'm gonna get some exposure, and instead of waiting to double my money, I got it like $400 or something like that. Then instead of waiting to go to 800, I'm gonna sell at 700 something. And that's what I did. And I was thinking, well, I'm a genius, you know, like couldn't even buy a used car or something like that back in the day.
Two of us, don't worry.
And even then, after that, it still took me many years to actually understand that. Only now I think I'm starting to understand. But from now and then, I get myself into conversations and people slap me on my face because I'm like excited about something. They're like, no, man, you don't understand the implications. And I'm like, oh, okay. So how was the process for you? What actually made you understand Bitcoin?
I think understanding Bitcoin, it's an ongoing process. We never finish to understand it because Bitcoin keeps on expanding. Do you remember this meme where, you know, this guy has an idea and then it's a bigger idea and then the brain explodes? I think this is the journey into falling into the rabbit hole, you know, and the Bitcoin rabbit hole. So I think it happened to all of us that we came for the speculation and then we stayed for the revolution. But the depth of the revolution and the implications of this revolution we just keep on understanding where we're going. So I think in my case happened the same as you. First learned by the newspapers about the price, and it's probably the best investment in human history because of its absolute scarcity. Just higher demand implies higher price. That's why we feel confident to educate about Bitcoin to people who have very underprivileged situations, because we know that by design, on the long term, despite short-term volatility, Bitcoin will help them build generational wealth. So this is the first thing that we understand. But then, when we keep on understanding the political implications that Bitcoin will have, because Bitcoin, on top of that, is the absolute private property that cannot be confiscated by governments. So we're living in a world after 70 years of Second World War II, the World War II, where the level of taxation and the size of the government, it would have been impossible to believe decades ago. The amount of people living out of the private sector, with the amount of spending, as Elon Musk is saying every day, the US is broken. Argentina was broken a couple of years ago, last year. Brazil is broken too. And these politicians that are so reluctant to reduce government spending, and because people just cannot pay more taxes, they finance those deficits with money printing without letting people know, and then blaming inflation on the private sector. This is being unmasked. People are starting to realize the level of theft and corruption that is happening in the US, in Latin America, everywhere in the world. But the interesting thing is that by having unconfiscable private property, we, the people, have now a very powerful tool to renegotiate a social contract with our politicians that we haven't had in the last 500 years. This is something that we thought it was already discussed. Somehow, we humans do not have a long-term memory to understand that every certain amount of centuries, the social contract is renegotiated. So the change from absolute monarchies to feudalism to the modern state to the current corrupt democracies, these are changes that happen every certain couple of centuries. And what is happening right now, I believe, is a profound renegotiation of the social contract, in which Bitcoin will play a key role empowering the individuals, so we can negotiate how much of our energy and work we're willing to give back in order to have an organized society. And something very interesting from one of my favorite books from Álvaro Di Maria.
That's what I wanted you to say, talk about.
Yes. So Álvaro is a very good friend. He wrote the foreword of this book, Álvaro, and he wrote a book called The Philosophy of Bitcoin. And he invites us to understand the political implications that Bitcoin might have when it's globally adopted. Because if you think about it, countries and governments have been designed in the agro-industrial age, where you could not move your factory to another country, or you could not move your land to another country. So somehow you were a hostage of your government, and they could tax you, they could change the rules, and the only option was to bribe or to lobby politicians to defend you. But now we are in a different world, and politicians have not realized it yet. We're living at the beginning of the digital age, where most of the GDP and value in society is created online, in the cloud. You could be working from here, from El Salvador, running all your projects worldwide. If you feel that the social contract offered to you by the government of El Salvador is more convenient to you and your family than the one offered in Brazil or Argentina or Europe or anywhere. So for the first time, with Bitcoin, we can and global ubiquity of the internet, we can decide where to live, where to work, and we could move all our wealth with us.
Yes.
So this is a very peaceful and powerful tool to renegotiate our social contracts. And those governments that do not understand it will just lose their digital talent. I know for a fact several Brazilians who are leaving Brazil right now because of the tax pressure that they are receiving and the lack of liberty to build their projects.
This is so amazing. That's what we were talking about the other day, that it's the money of peace. I'll leave you with a question. I'm going to show people the beautiful sunset that we just have in front of us. And meanwhile, I'd like you to be thinking about all the lessons that we have from all the stories, not only the ones that you have already documented in printed format, but also there is on digital format. You were telling me that we have around like 400 or more circular economies. So people might be thinking, like, I love to orange peel my neighborhood or my town, my entire town, or maybe not about my town. Maybe I'm gonna get another vehicle and I'm gonna make my own version of Bitcoineta. There are multiple ways people can actually go and get things done. Think about some good practice tips, practical things that people can do. Meanwhile, I'm gonna show you guys here. This is so beautiful. Here you are sharing with us sunset on Bitcoin Beach. Maybe we can sit like this, Gabriel, because now, let's see if it will work. As you can see, everything is very improvised here. I think it's more natural. It feels like you are together with us. So go ahead. Oh, actually, I think that was a bad idea. We're gonna get very dark. Yeah, maybe you go back. Yeah, otherwise, sorry. See, I told you it was very spontaneous conversation. Let's go.
I understand that you want to share this beautiful sunset. It's Bitcoin country is so incredible. So what I like about the circular economies, the Bitcoin circular economies, is that we've talked about, so we haven't spoken about the technological aspect of Bitcoin. That's a huge dimension. We talk about the economic implications of Bitcoin. We discussed briefly the political implications of Bitcoin. I believe that the Bitcoin circular economies comprise the social aspect of Bitcoin, which is an area that has been a little bit forgotten or not explored in depth. And it could have huge potential implications in order to have a more free and better society built upon abundance instead of the scarcity and the debt that we feel living in the fiat standard. So what I like about the Bitcoin circular economies, which are these projects that have started adopting Bitcoin as store of value and means of exchange on different parts of the world, is that you can immediately see the benefits, the social benefits, and the human development that living on sound money bring to society.
Can you be specific? Now, some examples of what do you mean by that?
Yes. So you know that when you are living on the fiat standard, when you're earning your salary or your income in fiat, fiat is devalued all the time. So you have this feeling of running in the rat's wheel, that you never have enough. Have you heard about many? I'm sure many in your audience are teenagers or young people, and many times we hear that old people tell us that young generations don't like to work, don't like to effort themselves. But it's not that they are not willing to do it. It's just it doesn't make sense. If you're just finishing university now, you need to work 70 years to buy a tiny apartment in São Paulo. That doesn't make sense. So the incentives in the fiat world do not make sense.
In Brazil, we have something we call nem. Nem trabalha, nem estuda. You don't work and you're not studying because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't compensate.
Exactly. The problem is not the young people. It's the economic incentives, what we are offering to them as a society. As opposed to that, when you start earning your salary in Bitcoin, and despite short-term volatility, we understand it's something that people need to learn how to deal with, and many of them in the circular economies are converting part of what they are receiving in fiat for their everyday life, but they have, for the first time, an incentive to save a little bit. It doesn't matter how much, but a little bit that they know that on the next 10 years can provide them a better life for them and their families. So what you see in Jericoacoara, where we have the first Bitcoin Circular Economy in Brazil, here in El Zonte in El Salvador, then we also covered Costa Rica with Bitcoin Jungle, Bitcoin Lake in Guatemala, and one of my favorite, which is Bitcoin Ekasi in South Africa. It's a very poor town where through surfing and sports, they started paying the kids in sats to learn how to surf and become surf instructors, to learn English and become heads of tourism. They are also teaching them how to become lifeguards, so they can have an earning and a salary. And they immediately understand about saving and how consuming a bit less today can bring them great benefits in the future. This is what we call in the space reducing time preference. But sometimes sounds like a theoretical idea. You know, this thing that inflation makes you rush into consuming. If you save, let's say, $1,000, what would you do with it? You just go traveling, you just buy a new TV. It doesn't make sense to save it, because in 10 years, when you want to buy a house with that, the house will be worth 10 times more.
That's why in Brazil it's very common. If you suddenly find some money, somebody gives to you, you get like a prize. The first question is, what are you going to buy with that? Because it doesn't even occur to people to try to save it, because you're like a fool if you try to save that money, because it's going to disappear.
It's a melting ice.
Yeah.
So people react to incentives, and the fiat incentives are to consume it away. And we are a generation that we lost the concept and the idea of saving. Our grandparents were great savers. They would save every little coin for their kids to be able to go to university and to have a better life, and their grandkids to be able to afford a house. But now with the hyperinflation and the massive money printing that we're going across the globe, there's just no point in saving in fiat. But when you start living in a Bitcoin standard, when you earn your salary in Bitcoin, regardless how much it is, kids immediately understand the value of saving again, because it makes sense for them. And you know what? There are so many benefits beyond the financial and economic benefits, because when you think long term, suddenly you care about your community. So you start caring about human relationships. You care about your neighbor.
Explain why. This is so interesting. Explain why.
Because you're planning for the long term. In South Africa, the first shop in Ekasi that accepted Bitcoin had a fire. They lost all their products. So they almost went bankrupt. But they let the ecosystem know. And the global community donated for them to buy products again so they can start their business again. So this is the kind of help that you see in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Everyone helps each other because you can be the one that needs help in the future. So having a good relationship with your neighbor, building long-lasting relationships with your family, suddenly become a thing again, as we had a few generations ago. Suddenly you care about taking care of your community, picking up garbage, not polluting your water, because you are planning for the next 10, 20 years. In El Salvador, 5 years ago, the only dream that the youth had was to emigrate to the US. or become a gang member, because everyone was thinking short term. Now no one is thinking in living El Salvador. It's the land of opportunities, the most beautiful place in the world. And also they are thinking how to start their own business, what they're going to do with these savings in a couple of years when they are large enough, maybe start a shop, maybe start buy a car and start driving tourism. Everyone has this entrepreneurial spirit again.
That's beautiful. Let's go for some practical tips, because you have seen circular economies that really work, they go really well because of this or that element, and some of them that struggle because they did something that is not a good practice. So what are the do's and don'ts for trying to help create a circular economy?
Well, so the book is full of tips, not coming from myself, but coming from the actual founders of these circular economies. They have similarities, and at the same time they are completely different. So one of the lessons I would say is that Bitcoin is not the end goal. Bitcoin is just a mean. The end goal is contributing to a better society, helping your community. So it's very important that you, who understand the problems and the strengths from your own community, adapt these ideas to whatever you guys need. So for instance, in Costa Rica, they already had expats, tech expats living in Costa Rica, many of them with sats already. So the problem there was not giving sats to the people, but letting them or facilitating how to spend them. So that was what the Costa Rica circular economy focused on. The issue in El Salvador and in ECASI is completely different. They have very poor kids with no dreams and no hope. So they started working and thinking how to create job opportunities for them.
Can you talk about Hope House?
Yeah, so Hope House is where everything started here in El Salvador. It's a social project that found many kids living without fathers and without brothers, because many of them emigrated, they were in exile, or many of them became gang members or were victims of the gangs. So Jorge, Chimbera, and Mike starting playing like a father figure for them, giving them values, taking care to make sure that they were progressing at school, teaching them how to surf. They created the first lifeguard program. So many of them work as lifeguards now because of that project. They taught them English. They taught them computer science. And many of them are adults now, have works and jobs because of Hope House. And one day they received a mysterious donation, an anonymous donation in Bitcoin, but with the only condition that they do not convert those Bitcoins into sats, into fiat, but they distribute them in sats throughout the community. And that was exactly when the pandemic came. And here in El Zonte, the situation was really, really tough. Many people didn't even have to put a food on the table. So they started incentivizing the kids that didn't lose subjects at school, that continue going. They were teaching them at Hope House because the school was closed, and many of them didn't have a computer. So they kept helping them so no one lose the year at school, incentivizing them with sats, but being very cautious to not create a dependency. So many of the circular economies balance this very thin line on helping the community without creating dependencies. So they incentivize them to own their own future, to study a new skill, and to be able to provide a better future for yourself and your family, but without being dependent on giveaways, because giveaways can end, donations can disappear. So what many of these circular economies are working now is in how to move from a donation-based project into a sustainable project. Tourism is very important, so I would like to invite everyone in your audience to visit these circular economies, the ones that are appear in the book and all the others that are popping up around the world. Those in Brazil, visit Jericoacoara, pay in sats to the community, Because what we have in Jericoacoara, for instance, is very wealthy tourism and very poor local community. So what Fernando and the Praia Bitcoin team is trying to do is to make sure that those sats keep on circulating. They are working very close with the school, so the kids are receiving sats and buying fruit in the school. And I would say that they know more about the financial system of the future than many other people in São Paulo who do not know about Bitcoin. And one of the, I would say, most important recommendations for anyone in the audience willing to bring the benefits of Bitcoin to their own community is that it is very difficult if you show up in a community, say, let me teach you about Bitcoin, let's integrate Bitcoin here, we're gonna save you. Even when Bitcoin is a trustless technology, human trust is still very important. So the most successful circular economies have been those where you had a team helping the community first. Like Hope House here in El Salvador, who were working with the local community before Bitcoin appeared, and then Bitcoin was like a turbo that accelerated that process. In Ekasi was the same thing. They had an NGO called Surfing Kids, who were teaching kids how to move away from poverty through surfing. And then they received a Bitcoin Beach donation, and now they became Bitcoin Ekasi. And you see how Bitcoin helps, but it's very important to start with a team that has this motivation to serve others. Because this is the most important part, and it's easier to build upon a community of social entrepreneurs that are willing to give away their time and their energy to help their community, and add Bitcoin to that, and not start the other way around.
That's really, really useful. Yeah, it makes total sense. And it goes with personal development in general. You give value first. Yeah. After that, you try to move ahead and do other things. This has been extremely nice. And now I'm gonna show again to you guys how we have the end of the sunset. It's getting dark. Gabriel, a final word of inspiration to everybody about this peaceful revolution that we're having. What would you like people to remember from this conversation? Or what message would you like them to think of whenever they look at you, they think of your name, they read your book? What is something that is an important message to you would like to share with people?
The final message would be that for the first time in many years, probably many centuries, we can make a contribution to have a better world. I think we all share this feeling that there's something wrong with the world that we're living in. This feeling that every generation is worse than the other. It has never been like this in human history. With technology...
Let me just make it easier for people to understand your point. But why Bitcoin would help with that? Because not everybody has the same level of understanding of Bitcoin. So explain a little bit why Bitcoin would help with that.
I think when you guys study Bitcoin, right, my recommendation always, instead of buy Bitcoin, is study Bitcoin. Once you study Bitcoin, you immediately understand the failures of the fiat system. Every single fiat currency that we had in the history of humanity has always failed. From the Song dynasties in China to the Roman Empire, all big empires always fell in the same way. When the cost of maintaining the empire is larger than the taxes or the thefts that they can take from other countries or neighboring communities, you have a deficit. And Every single empire has fallen into the temptation of funding those deficits, printing money. And that has always in the history of humanity led to hyperinflation, poverty, and inequality. We are just really bad at having a long-term memory and learning history. We are in a very special moment in human society. We are at the end of the era of the dollar. It lasted for 75 years. It started at the end of World War II. And if you see the amount of debt that our countries have, it's unbearable. So this is why we are feeling that regardless how much we work and how much effort we put, we do not have time to take care of our families. We don't have time to think about the universe and the stars and how to build a better society and spend time with our friends and enjoy life, which is such an important part of being human. So Bitcoin fixes all that because it cannot be manipulated, because it has a fixed supply that cannot be increased, and because it's politically neutral. And even if all G20 countries and all the major corporations in the world and the World Economic Forum and every single one in the world collude to destroy it, it's been developed by the smartest cypherpunks of the last 40 years to protect humanity, to protect individuals and individual freedoms, so we can flourish, we can build long-lasting communities, we can take care of each other, and we can build a better world. So study Bitcoin, get involved. Do not be reluctant saying someone else will fix it for me. We have the most incredible technological tool in human history, but the balance of power has so many people that are willing to make sure that nothing changes. Those who own the fiat system already understood Bitcoin, and they want to centralize Bitcoin. They want a Bitcoin with KYC, that half the population of the planet who do not have an ID or live in a favela and don't have a street number. This is collateral damage for them. They don't care about the global financial system that could benefit 8 billion people. So it's very important that we understand this technology and that we get involved to make sure that we can use this to build a better world.
Yeah, because one thing that we recently heard many people talking about is not that you say Bitcoin has already won. No. It has not. It needs you, needs your involvement. So get to know the book, study Bitcoin, and let's meet one day, just like we're doing here right now, and so many amazing people. Thank you so much, Gabriel.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.